I remember this day like it was yesterday. My wife Camilla just gave birth to our first child. I had not yet recovered from all these new sensations that filled me with the joy of parenthood when I suddenly noticed something strange. Our son looked different than I expected. With every look at him, my suspicions only grew. That day I met Camilla at the maternity hospital to take her and the baby home. As soon as I saw the child, I froze. I couldn't believe my eyes. The baby was dark-skinned. It was like a bolt from the blue. My heart began to beat wildly, and my mind was agitated with thoughts and guesses. I could not hide my anxiety. "Camilla, what is it?" I asked, pointing to the child. She tried to stay calm, but I could see she was nervous. "Derek, don't be nervous, please," she said softly, trying to take my hand. But I recoiled. "Are you crazy? How could this happen?" I could barely contain my anger. Camilla tried to explain, but her words only irritated me more. She told me something about genetics and the possibility of such a thing being passed down in the family, but I didn't listen. My thoughts were focused on only one thing. How could my wife do this to me? I returned home with a heavy heart, leaving Camille in the maternity ward. My mother-in-law, Helen, came over to help take care of the baby, and of course, she still didn't know what had happened. When she asked about my son, I didn't know what to say. I felt only anger and betrayal. "Where is our little treasure?" Ellen asked happily, entering the room. "Has Sasha already told everything?" she asked, thinking that I was sharing the news with joy. But when she saw my face, her face changed. "He told," I sighed. "And you might want to sit down too before you hear it all." Ellen looked at me, then at Camilla, who had just walked in, and said confused, "What's going on here?" Camille told everything, crying, and I listened as she tried to explain. But her words didn't matter. All I could think was, she betrayed me. I couldn't even look at her. My world, which I thought was so stable, suddenly fell apart. The next few days were terrible. The whole building heard the news. Neighbors talked behind my back, and every time I went outside, I could feel their eyes on me. I did not know how to react to all these suspicions, rumors, and hints. Even Helen began to suspect Camilla. "Maybe you were raped," once Ellen asked, looking at Camilla. I almost fell over from this question. Why did everything go like this? How could we find ourselves in such a situation? And here we are, in our house with 3 people, and a big problem between us. Camilla was trying to find answers, and I could tell she was hurting too. But this did not make me feel better. The next day, Helen decided to come back to us to help sort out this situation. She brought some old genetics books with her. She decided that we should dive deeper into the topic. Maybe then we will find the answers. I watched her and Camilla go through page after page, but I couldn't focus on it. All I wanted was to find the truth. Maybe then I can trust my wife again. But so far, all I've seen is lies, betrayal, and doubt in every word she said. We decided to do a DNA test to dispel all suspicions. Camilla agreed immediately, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't know what to expect, and neither did I. But I had to know the truth, whatever it was. I remember how she approached me the night we agreed on the test. Her eyes were red with tears. "Derek, please believe me. I didn't cheat on you," she whispered. But I could no longer believe her words. Everything seemed so distant and alien. Our happiness was destroyed, and I did not know how to restore it. After the night we decided to do the DNA test, my thoughts were in a fog. I could not concentrate at work, could not find peace at home. Camilla kept trying to talk to me, but I pushed her away. Instead of speaking frankly, I became more and more withdrawn. I was torn by feelings of betrayal and pain. Camilla insisted that she believed in genetic inheritance, and that I should give her a chance to explain everything. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. I wanted facts. And that's why we went to the doctor to do the test. The doctor explained that the results would be ready in a few days. These days seemed like an eternity to me. Camilla, meanwhile, decided not to sit idly by. She began researching the issue of genetics, trying to find at least some rational explanation. But her every gesture, every action of hers seemed to me just another attempt to distract me from the truth. Helen also joined this search. She couldn't believe that her son could betray Camille, but suspicions were still there. She constantly turned to me with questions. Maybe this is a mistake? Maybe there is another explanation? We all got together one evening. Camilla came to us with some books, and we decided to discuss this situation again. I remember her sitting in front of me and slowly starting to say, Derek, I know how you feel. I can't understand how this could happen, but I love you and I would never betray you. I looked at her coldly and replied, Camillo, I don't need words. I need the truth. You say you didn't betray me, but then how do you explain the appearance of our dark-skinned son? Helen tried to soften the situation. She talked about the fact that sometimes genes can manifest in unexpected ways, and that maybe it is heredity. She even remembered an old relative who was dark-skinned, but this only fueled my suspicions even more. Are you serious, Mom? Are you saying it's all genes? Well, then explain how we could get such a genetic inheritance? Camilla tried to explain again. I don't know, Derek. Maybe it's a really rare genetic trait. Or maybe we should look deeper into our bloodlines for answers. But I could not take her words seriously. Why don't you just admit it's your fault? That you betrayed me? Camilla cried, and I saw pain and despair in her eyes. You'll never believe me, Derek. Never. She left the room, and I was left sitting there, feeling anger build up inside me. Ellen sat down next to me and said quietly, Son, I understand your feelings, but you have to be careful. You can destroy everything you had because of suspicions. I couldn't agree more with her. I can't just sit and wait, Mom. I have to know the truth. I have to know who betrayed me. The next day, Camille went to her mother, trying to find support. She called me when she was already there. Derek, I talked to my mom. She doesn't understand how this could happen either. She says we've never had any black relatives in our family. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I still couldn't support her. You think that will calm me down? Your words mean nothing without evidence. She was silent for a few seconds, then quietly replied, I just want you to know that I have never cheated on you. And if you decide to leave me, I will understand. I dropped the phone and collapsed on the couch, overcome by a sense of hopelessness. I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that I couldn't trust my wife anymore, and that was the most painful of all. Meanwhile, the neighbors continued to gossip. I could hear them talking behind my back, and every word they said pierced me like a knife. Oh, did you see? They gave birth to a black boy. What would that mean? Or, heard Camilla had an affair with one of her exes. How embarrassing. My anger grew. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided that I had to find the truth myself, the truth that would put an end to all these guesses and gossip. The days after our conversation with Camille seemed endless. I felt like I was losing control of my life. My trust in her was completely shattered. How could I continue to live with a woman I no longer understood? Could she really betray me and then confuse me with her stories? Camilla was trying to maintain a normal routine, but I could see she was having a hard time. She often stopped in the middle of the day, looked thoughtfully out the window, or suddenly began to cry. She was trying to be strong, taking care of our son, but I could see that this situation was breaking her from the inside. This should have moved me, but instead it only strengthened my suspicions even more. One morning when I was going to work, Helen approached me. She had a very serious look, and I knew right away that she wanted to talk. Derek, we need to talk, she began, sitting down in the chair across from me. About what, Mom? I knew that she would not let me go so easily. About Camilla, and what's going on between you two. I see her suffering, and I see you suffering. It's destroying both of you. Do you really think she betrayed you? Ellen looked at me as if she was trying to get into my soul. I don't know, Mom. I just don't know, I answered, scratching my head nervously. All I know is that our son, he doesn't look like mine. You've already decided he's not your son, but is that really true? She spoke calmly, trying to be sensible. You know we had relatives with darker skin in our family. Maybe it's all genetics. I sighed, trying to find patience. It's all guesswork, Mom. I need proof. So what? You think this DNA test will clear everything up? She asked without looking away. Yes, and I hope that he will reveal the truth. So that I can finally decide how to live, I answered. Ellen sighed and shook her head. Derek, you need to understand that even if the result is positive, it doesn't mean that everything will be solved. Camilla is your wife, and she deserves a chance. You should at least listen to her. I knew she was right, but my anger and frustration were too much. I'll listen to her after the test, I said, standing up, and now I have to go. I couldn't concentrate at work. Every phone call, every document lying on my desk seemed distant and insignificant. My thoughts kept returning to that situation at home, to that heavy atmosphere that hovered between me and Camilla. Every look at our colleagues, who were laughing and joking, was like a blow to the heart. Why is my life so ruined? Why am I in this trap? On the way home, I tried to understand how Camilla and I had managed to find ourselves at such a sharp crossroads. How did everything change so suddenly? After all, we were happy, we dreamed about our future, about our son, and now all I could think about was the possibility of her betrayal. In the evening, I tried to talk to Camilla, but she avoided talking. She looked exhausted, as if she no longer had the strength to fight for our marriage. "Derek, I don't know what else to tell you," she finally said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm tired of constantly making excuses for things I didn't do." I could see tears in her eyes and felt that maybe we really had reached the edge. "Maybe we should take a break from each other," I said quietly, almost in a whisper. Camilla looked up at me. "Do you want me to go?" Her voice broke. I sighed. "Maybe that will give us both time to think." She was silent for a while and then nodded. "Okay, Derek, if that's what you want, I'll go." I felt my heart tighten. I didn't want her to go, but my suspicions and anger prevented me from thinking clearly. The next day, Camilla packed a few of her things and went to her mother's. I stayed at home with our son and Helen. The silence was deafening. I sat in the empty living room, looking at the photos of our family on the walls and trying to figure out when we lost the path we were walking together. Helen tried to support me by cooking dinner and taking care of the baby, but I could see that she was tired too. She understood that this conflict destroys us all. "Derek," she once said to me while we were sitting in the kitchen, "you need to know that Camilla loves you. She would never do anything to intentionally hurt you." I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. I didn't know what else to think. Maybe Helen was right. Maybe I was wrong. But if I was wrong, why is all this happening? Why is our son so different? On the third day after Camilla left, I got a call from the lab. The results of the DNA test were ready. My heart began to beat faster as I held the receiver. "Yeah, it's Derek," I said, trying to stay calm. "We have the results of the paternity test," said the voice on the other end of the line. "You can come pick them up." "Thank you, I will," I answered and hung up. It was the moment of truth. All my doubts, all my suspicions, everything depended on this one result. I took the keys, said a quick goodbye to Helen, and left for the lab. The road seemed endless to me. I tried not to think about what I would learn. What if the results confirmed my fears? What then? I got out of the car, entered the building, and went up to the third floor. The woman at the reception handed me an envelope. "These are your results, Mr. Derek." I took the envelope and thanked her. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a piece of paper. I ran my eyes over the text until I got to the main point. My eyes froze at the words, "Positive result." I almost fell. My son, he's mine. Camilla did not betray me. All these days, all these suspicions, I was wrong. I sat down on a bench in the corridor, feeling all this burden fall off me. But with the relief came a new feeling, guilt. How could I suspect Camille of such a thing? How could I doubt her? I realized that now I had to fix everything. I have to apologize. I have to get Camille home. But will she be able to forgive me? Will I be able to forgive myself for what I have done? When I returned home with the results of the DNA test in hand, the feeling of relief was mixed with deep shame. Helen met me at the door, and looking at my face, she knew what the results showed. She asked quietly, "So how?" "Positive, Mom. This is my son," I said, barely holding back tears. She nodded and raised her hands to her face to cover her eyes, which were beginning to fill with tears. "Oh, Derek, I'm so glad. But now you have to make things right. You have to talk to Camilla." I knew she was right. I had to fix everything. But the fear of how she would react held me back. How can I expect her to forgive me after all these suspicions and accusations? The next day, I gathered my spirit and decided to go to the house of Camilla's mother, where she was now. My legs felt heavy. Each step seemed unbearably heavy. When I drove up to their house, my heart started beating faster. I knocked on the door and heard footsteps from inside. The door opened and Camilla was standing in front of me. She looked tired, but there was hope in her eyes. "Derek," she said, looking at me in surprise. "Camillo, I need to talk to you," I began, trying to keep my voice level. She nodded and stepped aside, inviting me inside. We sat down in the living room, and there was an awkward silence for a moment. I didn't know where to start. She sat with her arms crossed over her chest, waiting for me to say something. "I got my test results," I finally said. She swallowed, waiting for me to continue. "And?" she asked. "He showed that." "He's my son," I said, and her face changed for a moment. I saw her eyes fill with tears. "You doubted me," she said quietly. It was not a question, but a statement of fact. "Yes, I doubted it," I answered, lowering my head. "And I apologize for that. I was wrong. I let my suspicions and fears destroy everything we had." She was silent, looking at me. I could not stand her gaze and looked away. I understood how deeply I had hurt her with my doubts and mistrust. "Derek," she finally said, "do you know how much it hurt me? Do you know how hard it was to see you suspect me of cheating when I've always been faithful to you?" I nodded, feeling my guilt wash over me again. "I know, and I regret it. I was reckless. I just didn't know how else to deal with my feelings." "Did you think I could betray you?" Her voice trembled with emotions. "How could you think that of me?" "I'm so sorry, Camillo," I said quietly. "I was confused. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know who to believe. My love for you and the fear of losing you, they blinded me." She paused, then sighed deeply. "Derek, I want to believe you. I want to forgive you. But it's not easy." I realized that a simple apology would not be enough. I took a step towards her and took her hands. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness. I want to fix our relationship. I don't want to lose you." She looked into my eyes, and in her gaze I saw not only pain, but also hope. "Derek, if we want to save our marriage, we have to start over. We have to build trust again." I nodded in agreement. "Yes, I am ready, and I will do everything in my power to prove to you that I am worthy of your trust." Camilla sighed and nodded softly. "Okay, then let's try. But no, it won't be easy." I realized that this is only the beginning of our road to reconciliation. I had to show her that I was truly sorry for my suspicions and that I was willing to work on our relationship. But I also understood that she needed time to forgive me. After we talked, I invited Camille to come home. "I want us to start over, Camillo. I want us to try to be a family for our son," I said. She hesitated. I could see that she was struggling with this decision, but in the end she agreed. "Okay, I'll be back. But you have to show me that you really want this." I nodded. "I will work on myself. I will do everything to make us happy together." That evening we returned home together. Helen met us with a smile and tears in her eyes. "Oh, my children, I am so glad you are back together." The following days were difficult. We both tried to find a common language and get back what was lost. I started going to therapy to deal with my feelings and learn to trust again. Camilla supported me in this and also started attending therapy with me. We started talking more, opening up to each other and talking about our fears and pains. I realized that she suffered as much as I did, and that our relationship suffered because of my mistrust. We gradually began to rebuild the trust and love we once shared. One evening, while we were sitting on the veranda, I looked at her and said, "Camillo, I promise you that I will never doubt you again. I will do everything possible to make us happy again." She smiled and replied, "I believe you, Derek, but we both have to work on it." I nodded, feeling like we were finally moving in the right direction. We both knew we still had a long way to go, but now we had hope. The hope is that we will be able to overcome these difficulties and build a better future for ourselves and our son. Camilla and I were getting back to normal life as much as possible after everything that had happened. The days passed in peace, but heaviness remained on the soul. Although we were both trying to work on our relationship, it felt like something was still not fully resolved. It was like a dark cloud that appeared from time to time on our horizon. Camilla continued to support me despite our struggles, and I could see how hard she was trying. But I also saw her pain. She had not forgotten how I had suspected her, and I knew it had left a deep mark on her heart. I needed more time to earn her complete forgiveness. One evening, we were sitting in our living room discussing our son's future. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Camilla opened the door, and in front of us stood our neighbor from the floor below, Miss Martin. She looked worried and nervous. "Good evening, Miss Martin. What's wrong?" Camilla asked, noticing her expression. "Camilla, Derek," she began, trailing off a bit. "I'm so embarrassed to say this, but I thought you should know." I looked at Camilla, startled, and she looked at me. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You know there are rumors," Ms. Martin continued. "The neighbors are talking about you and your son. They say, they say he's not yours, Derek." My heart froze. Even after the test results, which confirmed that Petya is my son, the rumors did not stop. They seemed to have only gotten stronger. Camilla, trying to control her anger, said, "That's a lie. We did a DNA test and it confirmed that Derek is the father." Mrs. Martin nodded. "I know, and I don't believe those rumors. But I just wanted you to know they're still going around." I could feel my anger rising. "It's none of their business," I said sharply. "We've done everything to dispel all doubts and still they're gossiping behind our backs." Camilla hugged me, trying to calm me down. "Derek, don't pay attention. We know the truth, and that's the most important thing." Mrs. Martin hurried away, leaving us alone with our thoughts. I could see that Camilla was as upset as I was, but she was trying to stay strong. For the next few days, I couldn't find a place for myself. Rumors and suspicions continued to eat away at me from the inside, despite the fact that I knew the truth. I began to notice neighbors looking at me as I walked down the hall, whispering behind my back. I couldn't take it anymore. One night, when we were having dinner with Camilla, I couldn't stand it anymore and said, "I can't take it anymore. Why can't they leave us alone? We've done everything to prove that our son is mine." Camilla quietly placed her fork on the plate and looked at me. "Derek, I understand how you feel, but you can't let this ruin our lives." "I won't let them ruin our lives, Camilla, but I don't want to live under their suspicions and doubts anymore," I said, feeling my frustration grow. She nodded. "We have to stay strong. We've been through so much, and I know we can get through this too." I knew she was right, but the feeling of injustice haunted me. If only we could somehow put an end to these rumors. But what else could we do? We have already done everything possible to prove the truth. All that remained was to come to terms with the situation and live on. The next day I decided that I didn't want to leave everything to fate. I went to the president of our condo association, hoping she could help deal with this situation. I told her about all the gossip and asked her to intervene to stop it. She promised to do everything she could to resolve it, but I wasn't sure that would help. When I got home, Camilla greeted me with a smile, but I could see the tiredness in her eyes. "What happened?" she asked. "I was with the head of the association," I answered. "I told her about the gossip. She promised to help." Camilla sighed. "Derek, I know it's hard for you, but we can't control what others think or say. We can only control how we react." I hugged her and said, "I know, and I'm trying. It's just that sometimes I feel like we're fighting against the world." "We are not alone," she answered. "We have each other and our son, and that's enough." I nodded, trying to calm myself down. Perhaps she was right. Maybe we really needed to just live our lives and ignore others. But even knowing this, I couldn't completely let go of my anger. Meanwhile, Helen, our mother-in-law, was also feeling the impact of these rumors. One day she came to us with an unusual proposal. "Children," she began, "I think we should do the DNA test again, this time openly and in front of everyone, so that no one has any doubts." I looked at Camille, and she looked at me. On the one hand, we had already done the test, and a repeat test seemed redundant. But on the other hand, maybe this will put the rumors to rest once and for all. "Derek, what do you think?" Camilla asked. "I think we should do it," I replied after a few seconds of thought. "If it helps put an end to all this gossip, why not?" Camilla nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The following days, we went through the testing process again, but this time we invited a few neighbors to witness what was happening. We wanted everyone to see that we are not hiding anything. When the results confirmed again that I was the father of our son, I felt a large part of my burden finally fall away. I saw how our neighbors who were present looked at each other in silence. Maybe now they will finally believe. Helen, who was with us during the whole process, hugged me and Camille. "I'm so glad we were able to prove the truth to everyone," she said with a smile. But even after that, I knew some people might remain skeptical. However, now I felt that we had done everything possible to protect our family and our honor. This event strengthened our relationship with Camilla even more. We understood that despite all the difficulties, we could overcome them together. We became closer than ever and decided that we would not allow any more suspicions and gossip to destroy our marriage. Life isn't always fair, but now we knew we had each other, and that was enough to get us through anything. After a repeat DNA test, life began to return to normal. The neighbors no longer looked at us suspiciously, and even the loudest gossipers began to shut up. It seemed that our efforts had finally paid off, but despite the outward calm, I still had a strange feeling that something was still wrong. Camilla began to leave the house more often. She said she wanted some time to herself to relax and forget about all the hardships we had been through. I understood her and did not ask unnecessary questions. She's been through a lot, and I didn't want to put pressure on her. But over time, these frequent absences began to cause me concern. Where has she been all this time? One evening, when she was late again, I decided to ask her directly. "Camillo, you often go out in the evenings. What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She looked at me slightly surprised. "Oh, I'm just walking around, visiting places I haven't visited in a while. I need some time to myself to think." "Think about what?" My voice was softer than I expected. "About everything," she answered, shrugging her shoulders. "About us, about our future." I nodded, trying to take her words in, but part of me still doubted it. Maybe I was being too sensitive after everything that happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. However, I decided to give her space and did not inquire further. The next few weeks were relatively quiet. We tried to get back to normal, spending more time with our son, visiting parks and cooking dinners together. But there was a barrier between us that we could not overcome. One day when I came home from work earlier than usual, I noticed something strange. Camilla's purse lay open on the living room floor. She was always neat and never left things scattered. I decided to look inside and noticed a small notebook among the usual things. On the first page there was an inscription, "Personal Records." I became curious, but I understood that it was her personal. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I couldn't shake the thought that maybe there were answers to my questions. Eventually, I opened the notebook and began to read. The entries ranged from simple reflections on life to more personal notes about our relationship. But one of the last pages caught my attention. It said, "I have to do this even if Derek never finds out." My heart froze. What did she mean? What was she doing? I felt a wave of suspicion roll in again. But this time I decided not to jump to conclusions. I put the notebook back, trying to look calm when she got home. That evening we had dinner in silence. I tried to start a conversation several times, but I didn't know how to do it. Camilla also looked reserved, and I could see she was trying to avoid my gaze. When she left the room to put our son to bed, I decided it was time to act. Later, when she returned to the living room, I calmly said, "Camillo, I found your notebook." She froze, her face turned white. "What notebook?" she asked, although I knew she knew what she was talking about. "The one that was in your purse," I replied. "I've read some of the records, and I'm troubled by what I saw there." She sat down on the sofa and looked at me, trying to understand what I was thinking. "You shouldn't have done that, Derek," she said softly. "Maybe I shouldn't have," I agreed. "But now I want to know what you meant when you wrote about what you should do, even if I'll never know." Camilla bit her lip and looked away for a second. "It's personal, Derek. I didn't want you to know." "But now I know," I insisted. "So tell me." She looked at me with sadness in her eyes. "Derek, this is about my past. There are things I've never told you about." My heart beat harder. "What do you mean?" "Before we met," she began, trying to find the words, "I had a different life. I did things that I now regret, and I was always afraid that it might affect our future." "What are these things?" I asked, trying to remain calm. She sighed deeply. "I was involved with a man who wasn't like you. He was dangerous. I cut off all ties with him before I met you, but now he's back in my life." I was overcome with fear and anger. "What do you mean he showed up again? Did you see him?" "No," she answered quickly. "I haven't seen him, but he's been trying to contact me. I didn't want to tell you because I thought it would pass." "And what does he want?" I asked, feeling my face burn with anger. He threatened me, she said, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. He wants money, and if I don't give him, he threatens to tell everyone about my past. I was overcome with anger. You should have told me about this earlier, Camillo. We could have found a solution together. I knew you'd be angry, she whispered. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me again. I came closer to her and hugged her. I believe you this time, Camillo, but you should have told me. We could have solved this problem together. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Derek. I didn't mean to hurt you more. I pressed her closer to me. We'll find a way to work this out. We're together, and nobody's going to stop us from being happy. It was an unexpected discovery, but now knowing the truth, we could act together. I decided that I would help Camille deal with her past and protect our family from any threat. We've been through too much for anyone or anything to separate us now. Now we knew that new challenges were ahead of us, but we were ready for them. We decided that we will not give up and we will fight for our future, no matter what happens. Camilla and I spent the next few days in constant tension. Her admission that the past is coming back to haunt us has added new anxiety to our already troubled lives. I understood that this man who threatened her was no ordinary figure. He was a part of her past, a part she never wanted to remember. We tried to lead a normal life. I continued to go to work and Camilla looked after our son, but the atmosphere at home was difficult. We hardly talked about the current situation, but we both knew that the moment was approaching when we would have to make important decisions. One evening, after we put our son to bed, Camilla came over and sat next to me on the sofa. She took my hand and said softly, Derek, I can't live like this anymore. I have a feeling this man is going to ruin our lives again. I squeezed her hand and nodded. I understand, Camilla, but we have to act together. We have to find a way to stop him. She looked at me with sadness in her eyes. I don't know what we can do. He won't leave us alone until he gets what he wants. Why didn't you tell me about him earlier? I asked. We could solve this together. I was afraid you wouldn't understand, she answered, lowering her head. I thought I could handle it myself so I wouldn't bother you. I hugged her and whispered, You didn't have to go through this alone. We're married. We're in this together. That evening, we decided that we would not wait for this man to appear in our lives. We contacted the police, told them about the threats, about his demands for money. The officer we spoke to said they could open a blackmail case, but we needed more evidence. Camilla looked confused. I don't know how we can gather more evidence, she said. He only contacted me through phone calls and texts. We can try to record his calls or save all his messages, the officer suggested. It might help us make a case. Camilla agreed and we decided to wait for the next call. We were on alert, not knowing what to expect. A few days later, her phone rang again. It was him. Camilla looked at me and I nodded, prompting her to answer. Hello, she said, trying to keep her tone calm. Did you get my message? Said a male voice on the other end of the line. You know what I want, and I won't wait forever. Why can't you leave me alone? She asked, trembling. Because I know you can pay, he replied coldly. And if you don't, I'm going to tell your husband about everything you did before. I gestured for her to continue. What do you want from me? She asked. $10,000, and it will be over, he replied. I could see how she was shaken by these words. Okay, she said after a short pause. I'll think about it. She hung up and looked at me. We have to do something, Derek. He won't stop. I nodded. We'll go to the police with these records. They can use them as evidence. The next day we went back to the police station and gave them the recording of the conversation. The officer listened to him and said, This is something. We will start an investigation, but you need to be careful. If he finds out that you have gone to the police, he could become dangerous. I could feel the tension building. We were in a dangerous situation, and I didn't know how far this man was willing to go to get what he wanted. Meanwhile, while the police investigated, Camilla and I decided to limit contact with everyone. We told Helen about the situation, and she also decided to help us. She stayed with us for a few days to help take care of our son and support us during this difficult time. A few days passed in relative peace, but I could feel something brewing. One evening when we were sitting at home, I heard a knock on the door. I went over and opened the door, and there was a stranger standing there. His eyes were cold, and I immediately knew that he was the same man from Camilla'S past. "Are you Derek?" he asked, looking at me without any emotion. "Yes, it's me," I answered, trying to remain calm. "We need to talk," he said, and began to enter the house uninvited. I stopped him with my hand. "You are not invited here. Go away or I will call the police." He smiled. "The police? Are you sure they will be able to protect you and your family?" I felt my muscles tense up. "What do you want?" "Same as always, money. Otherwise, everything Camilla has been hiding from you will be known to the whole world." I raised my voice. "You won't get a cent. Get out before I call the police." He leaned closer to me, his voice quieter and menacing. "You're making a big mistake, Derek. You don't know who you're contacting." I felt that the situation was getting out of control. I had to find a way to protect my family. "You're making a mistake coming here," I said, trying to remain firm. He smiled once more, then turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, feeling anxious. I closed the door and turned to Camilla, who was sitting in the corner of the living room, shivering. "Is that him?" she asked quietly. "Yes, it is him," I answered. "But he won't get what he wants. We will fight." We discussed the situation with the police, and they advised us to be careful and avoid any further contact with this man. They promised to increase patrols around our house. But despite all the precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still in danger. I knew we had to be ready for anything. That night, Camilla and I lay awake for a long time, listening to every sound in the house. I held her hand, feeling her trembling. "We'll get through this," I whispered to her. She nodded, but I could see that her fear did not subside, and mine too. But now we knew we had to be strong, not only for myself but also for our son. We couldn't let the past ruin our future, and we decided that we will fight to the end. For the next few days after this man's visit, Camilla and I lived in constant fear. The police increased patrols in our area, but we still felt that the threat had not gone away. Camilla tried to stay calm for our son's sake, but I could see her fear coming out at times. Every phone call, every knock on the door made her shudder. One evening, while we were all sitting in the living room, my phone rang. It was the officer handling our case. "Derek, we have news," he said. "We were able to find out more about this man. His name is Thomas. He has several arrests in his past related to fraud and extortion, but he is currently under investigation for another case. We believe he is using you as a distraction attention from his other crimes." I felt the tension ease a little. "So he's running?" I asked. "Yes, but he might come back. We advise you to be careful and not have any contact with him. We are trying to gather enough evidence to arrest him." I thanked the officer and hung up. Camilla looked at me, waiting for news. "The police know who he is. They think he's just trying to intimidate us while he's under investigation," I explained. She nodded, but I could see that it didn't calm her down. "What should we do now?" she asked quietly. "We have to be careful," I said, taking her hand. "And wait. The police will be able to handle him, and we just have to be ready for anything." We decided that we needed to stick together and be in touch with the police. Helen stayed with us, helping to take care of our son and supporting us morally. She also expressed her desire to stay with us indefinitely, to be there when needed. One evening, as we were all sitting at dinner, Helen suddenly said, "You know, I think we need a change of scenery. Why don't we go somewhere for a while, away from this place where nobody knows us? It might help. Let's relax a little and distract ourselves." I looked at Camille. "That's a good idea," I said. "We could go to the beach or the mountains. Just relax for a while and forget about all these problems." Camilla looked thoughtful, but then nodded. "Maybe this will really help. I think we all need some rest." We decided that we would go to a small house that belonged to Helen, located in the mountains, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was the perfect place where we could relax and forget about everything for a while. We packed our things, got into the car, and set off. During the trip, I could not help but notice how the tension gradually left Camille. She seemed a little more relaxed and even smiled while playing with our son in the back seat. Helen was also in good spirits, joking and telling stories from the past. When we arrived at the lodge, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders a little. This place really looked peaceful and secluded from the rest of the world. We spent a few hours unpacking and getting settled. The next day we went for a walk in the forest. The nature around was extremely beautiful, and I could feel my mind calming down. We found a small lake and decided to have a picnic. Camilla was laughing and playing with our son on the grass, and for a moment I saw her former cheerfulness return to her. Later that evening, we sat by the fire looking up at the starry sky. I hugged Camille and she snuggled up to me. "You know, this place is really special," she said quietly. "Yes, it's great here," I agreed. "I'm glad we decided to come here." "Me too," she whispered. "I think we need more moments like this." I kissed her head and whispered, "We will have them. We've been through so much, but now we can start a new life, a life without fear." We spent the next few days enjoying the peace and quiet. We hiked in the mountains, fished in the lake, and cooked over the campfire. Our son was delighted with nature and new experiences. I felt that we had finally found the peace we had longed for. But our peace was interrupted one evening when we returned to the lodge after a walk. I noticed that the door was open. I was on my guard and gestured for Camille to stay behind with her son. Carefully approaching the door, I looked inside. No one was in the house, but things were scattered, as if someone was looking for something. I felt my heart start to beat faster. "Camillo, stay here with your son," I said. "I'll look around the house." I went inside and began to carefully inspect the rooms one by one. Everything seemed in place except for some scattered items. I reached the kitchen and stopped. There was a note on the table. I took it in my hands and read, "It's not over. I know where you are. Thomas." My heart froze. He found us. As? How could he find us in such a secluded place? I realized we were in danger and turned back to Camilla and Helen. "We have to leave immediately," I told them. "He found us." Camilla looked at me startled. "What do you mean? How could he find us?" "I don't know," I answered, gathering our things. "But we can't stay here. We have to go back to town and tell the police." We quickly packed our things and hit the road back to town. I tried to stay calm during the ride, but anxiety was growing inside me. Thomas clearly wasn't going to stop. When we got back to town, I immediately called the police and told them what had happened. The officer told us they would try to track down Thomas and increase security around our house. That night we sat in our living room again, feeling cornered. "We can't go on living like this," I told Camille. "This man will not leave us alone." She nodded, and I could see the fear in her eyes. "What should we do?" she asked. "We have to protect ourselves," I replied. "We can't just rely on the police. We have to be ready to protect our home and our family." We spent the next few days in preparation. I installed additional locks on the doors and windows, purchased video surveillance cameras and an alarm system. We also agreed with the police about regular patrols around our house. Camilla began attending self-defense classes to learn how to defend herself if necessary. I also joined her so that we could be prepared for any situation. But despite all the security measures, we knew we couldn't stay on the defensive forever. We decided it was time to act. One evening we met with the officer handling our case and asked for his help in setting up a trap for Thomas. We wanted him to appear again, but this time we were ready. The plan was simple. We had to pretend that we were ready to give him money. We informed him that we agreed to a meeting to hand over the money. The police were there, ready to arrest him as soon as he appeared. The day of the meeting has come. Camilla and I waited at the designated spot, a remote park where we hoped Thomas wouldn't suspect anything suspicious. We had a bag of fake money with us and the police were lurking nearby, ready to pounce. When Thomas appeared, I felt my heart begin to beat faster. He approached us, his face was calm, but I could see coldness and cruelty in his eyes. "Do you have any money?" he asked. "Yes, they are here," I replied, pointing to the bag. He took a step towards us, but suddenly police officers appeared from all sides. They grabbed him and handcuffed him to the ground. Thomas tried to break free, but he was quickly neutralized. Camilla let out a sigh of relief, and I hugged her, feeling the tension that had built up all these months finally melt away. Thomas was detained, and we could finally breathe a sigh of relief. We returned home knowing that now we could start a new life without fear of the past. We had been through so much, but now we were free. "We did it," Camilla whispered as we sat together on the couch. "We got through it together." "Yes," I agreed. "And now we have our whole lives ahead of us." It was a new beginning for us. We knew there might be other challenges ahead, but now we were ready for anything. We became stronger, learned to trust each other, and, most importantly, never give up. And now we knew we could overcome everything together.